Hello, everybody, and welcome back down here at the Gamer's Den with me, Jordan, your master of lore and storyteller extraordinaire. For today's episode, what I'm going to be doing here is I just want to reiterate a point that I had made back in the NPCs episode, and there's something I had also touched on in the Putting It All Together episode. And that is when it comes to putting together your NPCs, whatever the supporting cast may be, the antagonists, or just your general filler grunts that you want your players to kind of mow through, you're going to want to build them specialized to their intended roles. What those roles may be is massively going to vary depending on the type of story as well as the type of setting. But as a general rule, your sneaky backstabbing rogues, you're going to want to build them to be good at being sneaky backstabbing rogues. You want them to have good stealth skills to get in position, maybe even some bluffing for those moments that somebody actually does somehow end up spotting them, just so that they can shake any suspicions or interest people may have on them. Your blacksmiths are going to smith, Shadowrun. Your fixers are going to be in the know, have good contacts, and be able to put the different players and characters into touch with other NPCs to generally network and get everything put together and put together a really solid run. Um, when it comes to specializing these NPCs, though, you don't need to go into a whole lot of great detail. For example, going back to the run of the mill grunts example, um, with Shadowrun, you definitely want to do a little bit of planning with the karma for the grunts. And uh, I should also note that most of these books are going to be pretty handy. Shadowrun, further back in one of its sections, it has some sample NPCs that you can use for your various campaigns and runs. Now, obviously, you're going to want to put your own personal touch to them and, again, specialize them and orient them towards the particular role that you have in mind. But it gives you a nice, solid framework to work off of that you can tweak and adjust to meet your own particular needs. Pathfinder, Dungeons and Dragons, they have plenty of bestiaries, lots of supplemental books and information for you to use and make use of that information there, again, as that rough starting framework in order for you to put together a really solid, really interesting campaign. That said, going back to this, you only need to go into a great amount of detail when it comes to your antagonists or characters that are important to the plot. Um, or anybody that the players are going to regularly interact with. So for your run-of-the-mill grunts, say you're going with a classic story where it's an orc and goblin horde descending upon a region, uh, you don't really need to go into very fine detail about each NPC. That just takes so much time. So this is more of a time-saving tip. Maybe like for an encounter, you're not going to be necessarily throwing 30 or 40 NPCs at the characters at a time. If you do, they just kind of end up being more general faceless minions, and that's fine, especially if it's going to be a higher level group or a group that say has access to some good AoE attacks like fireballs, or if they got grenades or rocket launchers or a nice heavy duty assault cannon. But um, it's better to just run those encounters in smaller chunks so that way you don't have to you don't have to spec out every single last skill point or bit of karma for each of the NPCs, but you can do little things to make them a little bit more distinct. Like this orc with the falchion has scars running across the right side of his face, or this one's missing an eye and has a crude eye patch over it, but the wound is clearly not healed properly and has left a grotesque disfigurement on his face. It helps to it'll help you keep track of the flow of battle. So if the fighter is engaging the orc with the disfigurement and the missing eye, and he puts him down, they know that orc is down. But the one with the scars running on the right side of his face, he's still up and in action. And I'll throw that bit of advice out there because not everybody plays with playmats. I do on occasion playmats and figurines to kind of help keep track of things, but sometimes playing space is limited. You can't throw everything out there and get everything set up like that. So being able to keep track of things in your head and for your players to be able to keep track of everything helps too. And just a little couple extra details here or there to make some of these little NPCs more distinct will help. Again, if you're throwing a swarm at them, the NPCs are going to end up being a little bit faceless, but that's okay. And when it comes to those kinds of combat encounters, you don't really need, like I said, you don't need to spec out and kit out the characters down to the last skill point and the last every itty bitty little detail. Just having their combat characteristics down is going to be enough. Knowing what their long arm skill, melee, if they have any dodge skills, is going to be most relevant for guards maintaining security over a highly secured black site sort of research lab under as technology. That's going to be most relevant. That and their perception skills, how good they are at noticing things that might be out of whack. Uh, that sort of thing will be important and relevant for the run. You don't need to know every guard's little bit of last bit of backstory. The only exception to that would be is if one of the guards is somehow relevant or important to the characters, like say the Shadowrunners do their research, do their homework, and they find out one of the guards for this as technology black site. How they find that out, don't know. Maybe Mr. Johnson knows somebody, or they know a fixer that knows a guy who has a friend that hangs out with this guy. But either way, they get a line on this guy, and they do the research, and they find a way that they can kind of put the squeeze on him, maybe blackmail him a little bit, or even if they can't blackmail him, maybe they find a way to get his credentials lifted somehow and get them copied, so that way they have a way of accessing this research facility without raising all the alarms immediately, anyways. A good decker could certainly do a lot of damage having a security guard's credentials for such a site. But again, that just depends on the type of story and how you want to get it set up. And that's just one example there of the myriad of possibilities that you have at hand. And really, the only limiter is going to be your own imagination and the imagination of the players. And that's where having details in place ahead of time and being ready to be flexible and adaptable is really going to help you. So if the players over the course of play they come up with something that's just absolutely brilliant or really cool, totally unexpected that you didn't have plans for, you can pounce on that opportunity and utilize that somehow. Sometimes it may take you a minute. I've certainly had plenty of moments where a player has suggested something. I had to go, wow, give me a second here. That's cool. I wonder, yeah, I think that could work. Sometimes it takes a minute, but once you have practice at this, and again, you establish details and you work and know this world and know the setting and you know the adventure or the run and you have it all ready, it allows you to be much more adaptable. And for something like Shadowrun, actually, that'll be really relevant because Shadowrun, just due to the nature of the setting and the type of play that's suggested, details are massively important, and figuring out the NPCs is definitely important. As an example, for a story important NPC, say the Shadowrunners are going to this as technology black site research facility to extract one of the scientists or lead researchers there, somebody who's just on that cutting, bleeding edge of technology and is about to come up with something really cool, and one of the other 10 megacorps wants to have that and wants that researcher. It's a two birds one stone sort of thing for any of the other megacorps. As technology loses one of their lead researchers, and this company gets one of their lead researchers, it cripples as technology's ability to produce and launch whatever this technology may be, and the other company now has the ability to either jumpstart a few of their own or just entirely adopt and take over this new bit of research, this new bit of technology coming out. So having those details figured out ahead of time and figuring out the details of that particular story important NPC is going to be, well, it's just going to flat out be important. You need to figure that out ahead of time. And again, like I always say, it comes down to details, details, details. And story is always going to be number one. So getting that figured out ahead of time, just incredibly important. I feel like I can't emphasize this enough. But hopefully, this video has impressed upon you the necessity of having this figured out ahead of time. So, with that said, I think we're going to go ahead and cut it here. Thank you very much for your time and joining me down here at the Gamers Den. We'll have more videos coming up down the line. Please, if you like the video, hit like and subscribe and click the bell icon for notifications when we have more content coming down the pipe for you. Thank you again for your time. You folks have yourselves a good night.